At 9:39 a.m., a Hong Kong paramedic calls his own station. He says his wife isn't breathing and that 999 won't answer. In the bedroom, she's found half-dressed on the bed, and cash and jewelry are gone. Police initially suspect a break-in, but the scene doesn't cooperate. There's no forced entry, and investigators can't find clear traces of an unknown intruder. Then the autopsy redraws the timeline. Death between 2 and 3 a.m., hours before the morning run. Her blood and stomach show large amounts of zopiclone, and the ligature mark carries what looks like towel fiber. Days later, their son describes 4 pills given the night before, followed by a warning. Don't tell the police. On the morning of September 30th, 2003, a Hong Kong paramedic named Wing-shing called the control room of his own station at 9:39 a.m. and said his wife, Lau Siu-han, wasn't breathing. He claimed he had tried calling 999, but no one answered, so he asked colleagues to come immediately and rush her to the hospital. 4 paramedics arrived at the family's flat in Luan Yao New Building, 102 Belcher Street, Kennedy Town, and were led straight into the master bedroom. Lau was lying on the bed, with her arms raised above her head. Her sleepwear had been pulled up, and her pajama pants were down to her calves. The team performed CPR on the way to Queen Mary Hospital, but she was pronounced dead on arrival. Later that morning, her body was sent to the public mortuary for examination. Loom's first narrative pointed to a break-in. Cash and some jewelry were missing, and the scene looked like someone had rummaged through drawers and the wardrobe. Police initially leaned the same way: an intruder, an attempted sexual assault, then murder and theft. It was a familiar storyline, and at first glance, it seemed to explain what everyone was seeing. But almost immediately, investigators began writing down details that didn't fit. The doors and windows showed no damage. The building had access control. People needed a card to enter and leave. If the killer was a random thief, how did he get into the building? And how did he get inside the flat, especially if the victim opened the door in sleepwear? The theft also looked selective. A jewelry box with more than 10 pieces worth over 100,000 Hong Kong dollars was left untouched, while cash and some lower value items were taken. It didn't feel like someone grabbing whatever they could. It felt like someone choosing what the scene should look like. Then there was Leung himself. When paramedics described that morning, they said he was unusually calm. He spoke at length about his own case theory, and he did not actively urge them to rush his wife to the hospital until a colleague cut him off and insisted. In a moment where seconds should matter, his focus seemed to drift toward explanation, toward shaping a story. Police then confirmed something even more damaging. He had not called 999 at all. So why lie about that? And why call his own station first? Still, at this stage, the case lacked the one thing investigators needed: evidence strong enough to break his claimed timeline and replace it with one that could stand in court. Leung said he left the building around 8:06 a.m. with a neighbor and returned with him at 9:22 a.m., a detail confirmed by CCTV. That detail mattered because it anchored his morning story to something real. It also forced investigators to ask a harder question. If he wasn't home during that window, then who was? CCTV also captured a man with a garbage bag opening the stairwell fire door at 8:51 a.m., close to the victim's usual time for taking out trash. Early speculation swirled around the image. Was she followed? Was she targeted? Did someone slip in behind her? But the work of investigation is often the work of subtraction. Frame-by-frame analysis later identified that man as a building resident and established he was eating at a roast meat shop across the street from 9:01 to 9:29, leaving no time window to kill. More importantly, investigators saw no other suspicious people entering or leaving during the critical period. The crime scene team sealed the flat and searched for 2 days, but found no unknown footprints or fingerprints. Even the key Leung pointed to yielded only the couple's prints. The story of an outside intruder kept running into the same wall, the absence of a stranger. With evidence still thin, police had to release Leung on bail after 48 hours, 5,000 Hong Kong dollars, while the case was transferred to the Regional Crime Unit. Outside the station, he declared loudly to reporters that his release proved he was innocent. To investigators, it sounded less like relief and more like performance, because they didn't believe the puzzle was solved. They believed it was unfinished. Then the autopsy delivered what the scene could not. Lao Siu-han did not die after the morning run. The medical examiner concluded her death was mechanical asphyxia and estimated the time of death between 2 and 3 a.m. on September 30th. There were no signs of a real sexual assault and no defensive injuries. Instead, her blood and stomach contained a large amount of the sleeping pill Zopiclone. A thick, subtle ligature mark circled her neck. Within that mark, forensic staff recovered fibers consistent with a towel. Investigators later reconstructed the staging. Her clothing had been pulled into a suggestive position, but the physical evidence did not support an attempted rape, only a deliberate attempt to mislead. The picture began to shift from random violence to controlled deception. Then came the tip that connected the drug to the household. On October 4th, the couple's son told police that the night before the death, his father handed his mother 4 pills and said she would sleep better. Before the children were taken in for statements, the father called and warned, "Don't tell police about the pills, or you'll kill me." When the autopsy revealed Zopiclone, the son told his sister, and together they decided the pills likely mattered, and they gave the information to investigators. Over time, the forensics did what witness accounts could not. By comparing thousands of trace samples, investigators found the owners for the biological materials and found no unknown intruder. The towel fibers in the ligature mark were matched to a pink towel inside the flat, and skin tissue from Leung's palms was recovered from both ends of that towel. Fibers from Leung's clothing, what he was wearing that day, were also found on the victim's clothes, indicating contact at the moment she was killed. Prosecutors later described this as an environmental evidence chain, quiet, technical, and difficult to explain away. Based on fiber distribution, forensic experts inferred a killing method. The attacker knelt between Lau's legs, wrapped the towel around her neck, and pulled both ends until she suffocated while sedated. Piece by piece, the investigation kept narrowing inward, back through the door that showed no damage, into a bedroom with no stranger's prints, into a timeline that no longer matched the story told that morning. As the investigation widened, detectives looked beyond the bedroom and into the couple's private life. Leung was 43. The couple were schoolmates and first loves, married in 1986, and had 2 children, a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. They lived together in a small flat they bought years earlier. From the outside, it looked like a stable family. Inside, the case suggested pressure, fractures that had been hidden. 7 days after the killing, Lao's sister, Lao Xiuling, went to the victim's printing company to sort through belongings. In a drawer, she found 3 letters. One was a photocopy of a breakup letter written by Liang to a woman named Xiao Ying. In it, he described falling in love and wanting to divorce and remarry. The letter was dated November 14, 2002. The other 2 letters were written by Lao to a Buddhist master. One, dated August 6, 2003, described the pain of discovering the affair, yet choosing not to divorce for the children, and for a relationship she could not let go. 2 days before she died, on September 28th, she wrote again, shifting to self-blame over past investment losses and promising to work harder for her family. Together, these documents painted a portrait of a marriage under strain, of a wife trying to hold the household together, and a husband already imagining a different life. Investigators also examined insurance. Lao had a 1996 life policy of $90,000 with Liang as beneficiary. 2 months before the death, Liang bought an accident policy of 500,000 Hong Kong dollars, and on August 2nd, he added Lao as an insured person. The day before the killing, he called the bank manager to ask about coverage. During the incident, he contacted her again to push for compensation handling. To prosecutors, this sequence looked like preparation and urgency. Questions asked before a death, and pressure applied immediately after. On September 20, 2004, police formally arrested Liang, and the next day he was charged with murdering his wife. The case went to trial in the High Court on February 9, 2006. The prosecution argued motive was insurance money and a plan to marry a mainland lover named Ke Xiaoying after Lao's death. A key insurance witness, manager Liang Meilan, testified that the defendant called the day before to ask about the policy, then called again around 10 a.m. the next day, sobbing that his wife had been killed, and about an hour later called back saying he'd calmed down and asked her to expedite the claim. It was testimony that didn't describe rage or grief as much as it described process, steps taken, boxes checked, outcomes pursued. Liang denied killing Lao and offered explanations. He said he lied about calling 999 because he intended to contact a funeral home first. He said the intruder might have worn gloves and shoe covers. He disputed his son's memory about the pills. He also admitted that the Zapaclone came from his station and that he feared losing his job. He said that was why he told his son not to talk too much. Near deliberations, the jury asked the judge a sharp question. If they accepted the time of death around 3 a.m. and the defendant admitted only he and the victim were in the room, could they infer he was the only possible killer? The defense answered, yes. It was a question that cut through layers of narrative, and it pointed straight back to the narrowed core of the case: time, presence, and possibility. That night at 8 p.m., the jury unanimously found Lung guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. In court, he broke down. His children cried as they said goodbye, and he told them to study hard, to treat him as if he were dead, and not to tell others he was in prison. In the end, the case did not turn on a confession. It turned on a collapsed timeline, and on a chain of small, stubborn traces that kept pointing back inside the home. A story that began as an outside break-in ended as an inside reconstruction. A sedative, a towel, a staged scene, and evidence that refused to support the existence of a stranger.